Well, it might be going or it might not. Hi, I'm Megan.
And I'm Mr. E, and we are live from the River House today. What's our show called? We Don't Know.
Innocence is the topic we're going to do. So we don't know.
We don't know innocence. That's right. We don't know innocence.
Yeah, and so do you want to share a little bit about how we came to this topic 10 minutes ago?
Yeah, let's do that, right? Well, first of all, we are in the second phase of the lunar cycle, and if you guys haven't been following our journey, or maybe you have, you know that we relate on the lunar cycle. So we've just come past the new moon, and Megan and I were both an absolute yes for going forward, and so here we are. And
I went to the hot springs to celebrate.
that's right.
It was great.
It was great. And now we're in the moon phase where we've set some intentions and we're moving into the next phase, and our resistance begins to show up. And we call it...
oh shit, I said yes.
Now what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I said yes, now what? I'm not feeling that way today.
No.
Okay,
no.
good. All right. But if sometimes we set a big goal, all of a sudden a few days later the moon starts to move around like it pulls water off to the side. It can open up some points of resistance. But today, my very dear friend, whom I married 2 years ago, on the new moon, incidentally, passed into his next incarnation, wherever that goes. And he was my age, 53 years old, Travis Denali Norris, and we're about to have a memorial service for him here at the River House. His teachings, Megan, are called The Alchemy of Innocence. And so we've chosen innocence as our topic today. More importantly, in times of life transition, this can be at the end of a breakup, it could be at the end of someone's life, it could be a divorce, it could be really anything, end of a job, end of a career, end of anything. How do we find our innocence and the other player's innocence in the game that we're in?
Well, and I think this is especially relevant even in this stage of the lunar cycle, which is where the resistance might come up.
Right.
So the resistance might come up, and innocence is a really great way to move through resistance of big changes. And so a lot of times, and you know, we brought up the topic specifically around the idea of death, but it works for a lot of other things as well. But I think death especially can bring up a lot of resistance. Like, it shouldn't have happened at this age. It shouldn't have happened in that way. Sometimes the resistance looks like regrets. It looks like doubts. It might look like grievances or bad memories.
Right.
I mean, it really obviously depends on the nature, but...
And why did this happen to me?
Yeah, why did it happen right now? I have, you know, even we'll make these correlations like, you know, why did this have to happen right now? And, you know, I had a death in the past couple of weeks as well. And it's just interesting to watch what comes up around the idea of death. And I think we're really curious of how we can use the idea of innocence, whether it's from our own perspective of recognizing that we can't stay in the past. And so what does it look like to just honor the love and the loving memories, and to release ourselves from anything we think we should have done, should have said. How do we move? You know, a lot of different things come up, and it looks different depending on the nature of the relationship and the scenario. And I think a lot of times we put different expectations or have different feelings depending on the age, depending on the way somebody passed away, and so many other things.
We were just having a conversation. It looks like Supertramp's on the line. If he is, and anybody else is on the line, please say hello and let us know you're here.
Yeah.
And what do you say?
Good morning-ish. That is kind of how it's feeling.
And Stephen is a great friend of Travis's, and a very dear friend of mine, and so he'll be over here later on today for the memorial service. And you know, a lot of people right now looking for a little bit of solace, and you know, we don't have a choice. We've all got to keep going forward. You know, life has changed. There's been a big change, and it might be like a missing tooth or something. You know, it's like all of a sudden, like your mouth feels different, your life feels different. Something might feel missing, and then how do you move forward in the present moment? You know, really in the present moment, be present with your feelings. Because what I've seen a lot of times is the grievances or the things that come up in your mind when somebody passes on or there's a big change in your life is can keep people from being in the love, can keep them from being in the compassionate place because they've got something unresolved.
Yeah, and I was so grateful last week because what I really noticed, and hey, Jamie, it's so great to see you from Australia. What I noticed last week at the memorial service with my family is my family really all came together and expressed like a ton of love with each other. But I've also been in experiences where whether it was property, whether it was money, whether it was grievances, whether it was whatever, I've also experienced when families have totally broken apart, whether I've seen it from the outside or been on the inside, where it's like the death just seems to create more and more separation. And how can we avoid making something that's harder?
Right. Because what I've noticed here is that a lot of people have been calling and is bringing people back together. Yeah. Many of us live such a busy life that sometimes of transition, the only time we see our family, and so what an opportunity to return to love. And so what is this innocence? How do we do that? How do we use innocence? How do we come to find and understand everyone's innocence? That's what the Course in Miracles teaches. It's what Travis's work today, we'll read from his book called The Alchemy of Innocence, is what my work and my books talk about. And yet my experience, Megan, over the last 10, 15 years is I can know that there's innocence. I can see innocence, but I don't always remember it, especially in times of, when life is challenging. And so that it feels like, how do we find our innocence and keep finding our innocence over and over and over?
Well, if we think of what has to precede even the idea of guilt versus the idea of innocence, the idea of grievance versus the idea of innocence, I don't think we can leave out this really important intermediary, which is judgment. And so when we decide, and we have to recognize that judgment's a decision, that like judgment is our perception, is our discernment, is whatever story we're trying to prove. It's our beliefs. And so we can use different things to, validate or invalidate our beliefs. And so I think when we look at the idea of innocence, or if we look at the idea of grievance or guilt or judgment or regrets or any of those things, what is it that we're trying to prove to ourselves about the situation, about this person? And so if I'm living in a ton of regret, then I've made a judgment that I'm guilty. I should have done more. I should have said more. I should have shown up in these different ways. That incident shouldn't have happened. And so in that moment, my judgment isn't compassion at myself for the loss. It isn't feeling. It's all of a sudden I've judged the situation. I've judged the past, and I've determined that I'm guilty.
And that's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing you behind all of what the words you said is the one locus of control that we have around change is that we can change our meaning, our perception, and our beliefs about something. In other words, our beliefs about God, or our beliefs about our friend, or to really seek and look a little deeper in and say, no, everybody's God.
Yeah.
On the inside, everybody is the spark. Let's not confuse the personality of the person that is now absent from our life for whatever reason or the situation. Let's not confuse the personality with who they really are on the inside.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we were kind of chatting about a little bit earlier before the show is the idea of what does it look like to acknowledge each person as the spark and to recognize their autonomy as the spark. Meaning, I know that death became a lot more of a peaceful experience for me when I began to just form the belief that there's some sort of soul autonomy as to when we choose to come in and when we choose to come out. And that's really hard to believe because sometimes it's a crazy accident. Sometimes it's an unexpected illness. Other times it might seem more, like, oh, that was an overdose. That was a suicide. And so we get to say, oh, that person might have inherently made some sort of choice to leave. But when I started to believe that on some maybe more unconscious level, that it was everybody's choice when they were going to lay the body down. And that's something I got from my spiritual practice, of Course in Miracles. It's not that you have to believe in that belief, but my question is, do the beliefs that you have around this thing, like death as an example, does it bring you peace? Because none of us are going to get out of this life without having to experience a lot of people making their transitions. And are the beliefs that you have around it helping you or hurting you while you're here?
We live in a world of entropy. Everything, the way out is this body will break down, and just like in a tree, just like in any living organism, it's everything is dependent on the intelligence that comes in the divine spark that we all are. And it's so easy to relate to people from our personality to their personality. And then we have all these expectations about how they ought to show up so that they won't hurt us or offend us or anything, because that's personality based. And I think what we're encouraging people and sharing with people is there's a way to study, open, a way to be, a willingness to love in every circumstance that can elevate your perspective to be more holistic in the way that we experience these things. And I find it so interesting that we cover up the two major transition points that there are. There's birth and death. we put them, behind walls and doctors and insurance policies and even the way we bury people. If you get buried, you can't even be put in the ground in a box anymore. You have to be in a vault inside another thing, and you have to be embalmed and all this. And it's very strange. And a lot of the death and dying, it happens behind the scenes. We don't honor it, and not that we don't honor it, but we just don't look at it so much. And when it happens, it can be such a shock to us.
Well, and I think one of the biggest challenges a lot of times that come up with any death, that's why we might even find, of course, if it's someone you're very close to, then of course it's completely natural to have a response. But what happens when we get an emotional response because we hear of a plane that crashed, or when we hear about a shooting that happened? Like, we may not have actually known those people, but it brings up this idea of human frailty, almost like this idea of our own immortality, of like the fact that we know that it's an inevitable truth that whatever body we're in right now is not going to live forever. We don't know exactly what's going to happen to our energy, to our spirit. We're not sure. At least I don't know what's going to happen exactly after this, exactly what it's going to look like. And but what I can say is that I think a lot of times we do have that response is because it's looking at something that seems like this human tragedy. Like, did we just come here to die? And how can we give our life more meaning and more purpose so that we're utilizing the time that we have here.
Well, another example to bring up what you're saying, that we had the grocery store shooting just a mile and a half from here. The grocery store I went to for 22 years, all of a sudden my entire world is disrupted, not to mention 10 people dying and a lot of questions and whatnot. So I noticed that in the collective, a lot of people are mad at the shooter. But they're still carrying that anger forward in their life. They didn't have anger towards the shooter before. Now all of a sudden there's been this tragedy that we've created a certain belief structure around, and then all of a sudden now people are angry and upset. So two things are happening. You have an open-heartedness where a lot of people were cracked open, maybe could see things more compassionately and whatnot. But but I noticed that compassion was kind of split, where there were compassion for the 10 people involved and no compassion for the one person that did all this shooting. So interesting in that moment, how do we find innocence in that so that we don't have to carry that guilt forward? Because if we're all of a sudden mad at the shooter and carrying that around, that becomes ours. That becomes the poison that we carry.
Well, and I think a lot of times guilt projects blame as well. And so I think that a lot of this goes back to one of our very first episodes, if not the very first one, which is everybody's responsible, nobody's at fault. And I think that's so important in some of these situations where we see with that shooter that, hey, what have we been doing as a society? What have we been doing to help mental health? What does our health insurance do to provide people with the type of help that they need? How accessible is that to certain people versus other people? What is, and I'm not familiar with all the particulars of that particular of that individual, but where's the racism that's still in society? Like, where are some of the constructs and some of the triggers that we might all be collectively playing some sort of role in that creates a kind of conditions where there are so many mass shootings that are happening more and more regularly, and we've had violence as a society for much longer than automatic weapons became available. And maybe it came out more as religious crusading, and maybe it came out in different ways, but what's up with what we're doing that's creating the sort of violence that we're experiencing?
Right.
But instead it just gets to be this one person. And so that means, what do I have to change? I just get to be angry at that person rather than say, what does it look like as a society for us to take more responsibility for that person?
If we knew someone was innocent, if I knew you're innocent, and we talk about this a lot on our show, we talk about the commitment, transparency, and the innocence.
It says it's dropping out. By it's dropping out, do you mean that you're not getting good sound quality? We might have to just speak up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where was I?
If we knew that everybody was innocent, and we talk about this a lot on the show.
Right. So if I know you're innocent and you know I'm innocent, then we can move beyond a lot of things, because I know we're both learning, right? And so what peace of mind do we have when we know someone is innocent? That's actually when the mind lets go. Oh, they're innocent. My mind was making up a story. They were against me, or they did something on purpose, or they made some bad choices that caused them to do this and that. And so, I know that when I see everyone as innocent, including myself, that I have more peace. And then, and so, okay, now if we're both innocent and we're all learning, everybody's learning, that seems to me a good sort of on-ramp to discovering a new way to perceive the world, so that we don't have to carry, because we don't serve anything if we carry our grief around like a lot of luggage, and then everywhere we go, we've got to express our grief and be upset about it. We perpetuate that own thing in us. We're punishing ourselves by carrying the grief. And I'm not saying that if your father, your brother, your sister, or anybody close to you passes, that there ought not to be some element of grieving, but how can we find innocence in that, so that our grief and our work becomes something that we're moving through to an end, rather than something that we carry forward and perpetuate?
Yeah, and I think we can even use grief, whether it's from a breakup, whether it's from something that didn't work out at a job, whether it's, whatever it is, that we can use that sort of like grief or grievance, and sometimes those two things go hand in hand.
Right.
It's like we're in...
Funny word choice, right? The same word, really.
Yeah, grief and grievance. And then we can use it as a means for how we treat others moving forward. Like, oh, if that person cheated on me, this gives me free license now to be suspicious of all future partners, and to decide I get to look at their text messages or something like that. It's like, oh, I'm using this grief and grievance, and because I didn't actually heal through the pain, because I just stayed in blame and I didn't take any personal responsibility for, what was going on with me energetically at that time, where I was attracted to the type of energy of someone that would betray or hurt, or that I could not trust. Like, what do I need to do to develop the trust within myself so that I can trust that I'll attract trustworthy people moving forward? And so that really is the difference, whether it's, oh, I want to insulate myself from hurt, I want to use the hurt as walls to push people out, or to justify behavior that is fear-based within myself, or I really want to do the work to process through this so that I can utilize it for my growth and change and relationships moving forward. And it's a completely different approach, even though you might go through a process of grieving.
Right. But to come out on the other side and be free.
Because the grieving and the innocence is, okay, I'm in sorrow. Okay, that behavior was hurtful. Okay, but how can I get back to the innocence of we are all learning again. And so we're all learning. I'm learning. I forgive myself for the ways I showed up in that relationship. I forgive myself for the things that I said or didn't say. I forgive myself. And then I forgive that person, and I want to thank them for the reflection that they gave me of what I needed to work on, because I don't want to replicate that experience. Because if we don't do that work, I can state from my own experience that it tends to repeat itself in whatever way.
And we can be rest assured that, like you said earlier, as we get older in life and move on, we're going to have instances, quite frequently, sometimes, and that challenge us, really, really challenge our deep spiritual belief systems, and about death, about transition, about how we perceive the world and how we feel. I find it so fascinating. You've said many times, we teach what we need to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here we are, we're teaching innocence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because we want to learn it.
Yeah, but more than anything, I want to enjoy and be free in everything that shows up in life. Be free in what you dream about, and be free with what shows up in the dream. Well, a lot of times what shows up in the dream could be alarming or surprising or disturbing or any of the rest of it. And to the degree that we can be innocent, then whatever it is that life presents us, if we know we're innocent, we can flow with it in a much, much more pure way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think innocence is playfulness also. I mean, when you talk about enjoying what shows up in the dream, is, so often I don't even allow life to be innocent, because I believe that if things don't go according to my script, something or someone, maybe even God or the universe or this person or that job or it is out to get me.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, there's not even an innocence to the fact that life is just unfolding the way it is, and then taking my part in the responsibility of what meaning do I want to give it and how do I want to respond to it. Instead, it can become, I think self-pity and innocence just don't really go hand in hand.
And if we can turn it, as you were saying that, like here we are, we're about to have a memorial service. You never know what's going to show up in terms of grief for any of us. We don't know, because it's a new situation every single time. And what can I learn from this experience today? What can I learn from speaking to people about grief and being transparent? In other words, being really open with how I feel and what is happening in the moment, and being really open with what is happening with someone else, and giving the space, required. What can we learn from this experience? Is different than, oh my God, this experience is terrible. This is, tragedy. And it really is, where do we put our mind in these times of tribulation? Where do we put our mind? Where are we opening ourselves to the learning? Can we be guided by the spiritual principles that we all espouse by all the other times in life, when we, in a really challenging situation?
I was watching this video earlier this week, and it was on the 12 universal laws of success or something, and it was a woman named Frances Maxwell from Arkansas, and the video is not incredibly well produced, but what she's saying is amazing. So if you have the opportunity, I recommend you watch the 24-minute video and take notes. But one of the things that she was talking about, I can't remember exactly which law it was under, but this is just a simple statement of a simple fact. What we give our energy to, we energize. We energize what we give energy to. So whether that's an ex-partner, whether that's a story around why that death shouldn't have happened, all of a sudden I'm giving all my energy to this story that's bringing me pain, and I'm energizing it. I'm making it more real to me. I'm making it more prevalent in my life. I'm experiencing the harm of it, but it's because that's where I'm putting my energy and focus. And I have to recognize that when I'm feeling that something like this person or this thought, it's sometimes we can believe that we're being intruded upon. Like, I'm just having racing thoughts, or I can't stop thinking about this person, or I can't stop staying up at night thinking that it shouldn't have happened this way. And I think we have to start to realize that no one is coming in and stepping into our thoughts. There's no one who's imposing their will upon us. Like it has so much energy because we're energizing it with our thoughts.
Right. And what I'm hearing in there is a lack of acceptance. In other words, what has happened, how quickly can we get to acceptance? Okay, it was a tragic car accident, or it was a suicide, or it was an early death, or it was an unfortunate series of events, but it happened. You know, rather than spin, and I think we can get the mind to accept reality as it is. This is what's happening. This is what has happened, and what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? How can I come to a new understanding about this? And one of my favorite lessons in A Course in Miracles is, help me perceive this differently. How can I see things differently?
Yeah.
How can I see my life differently?
I am determined.
Oh my gosh.
I am determined to see things differently.
Yeah, I'm determined to see my innocence. I'm determined to see my friend's innocence who passed away early. I'm determined to see everybody around him today that comes here in their innocence, no matter what the grief brings up.
Yeah.
No matter what their own perception of how the situation is. And we never know. And death always brings up, very interesting things. I've noticed in my own family, even, when somebody dies, it's almost like there's a vacuum there. And, the way that person was in the constellation of the family kind of held it together in a certain way. And all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah.
And, people feel a little unbalanced because this person might have been a pillar or someone that they actually had judgment against. I mean, it could be a number of things, but all of a sudden in the empty space of that person being gone, now all of a sudden there's that energy, that thought pattern has to find a new target or be absorbed or, have a different way of expression.
Absolutely. And one thing that, as far as innocence is concerned, A Course in Miracles talks about everything that you see or witness in another person or within yourself is one of two things. It is either love or it is a call for love.
Oh, love it.
And I think that that's such a pivotal thing because we're not asking you or asking ourselves to not acknowledge when someone is having some incredibly harmful behaviors. We're not saying, just see their innocence. You don't need to set a boundary. You don't need to determine, what sort of reflections of the love you think you deserve, need to be in your life. You just need to see them beyond the way that they're treating you. That's not what we're saying as it relates to innocence. We're saying it's either coming from a place of fear, and a fear is a call to love.
Right. Let's not judge that.
Ella said hi to me.
Oh, good.
Hey, Lacey. Tell Ella I say hi back. I think it's really, really important to recognize that just because someone is calling for love or they're in a place of fear, and isn't that so often what it is? When I start attacking, I'm feeling defensive. I'm feeling a lack of love. I'm feeling a lack of security. I'm feeling a lack of safety in that moment. So all of a sudden, I've lashed out. I've said something that I don't mean. Yeah, it's not a great way to get love. It's probably not going to it's not going to activate that happening sooner rather than later. But isn't that really what it's coming from? In that moment, I'm experiencing a lack of love, a lack of peace. And so my behavior is a reflection of that. So it is a call for it. It's me saying, I don't have it right now. And I can tell I'm not experiencing it because of the way I just acted or because of the way that person just acted.
And the only way out of this predicament without furthering the cycle of cause and effect or karma or anything else is one person has to see somebody's innocence and not respond. And I feel like that's what Christ was saying when he said, just turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
They might be insulting you, but what you're saying is really a call for love. So as quick as you can say, I'm not being attacked, this is a call for love, then all of a sudden we become innocent in the moment, and that changes the dynamics of the situation that we find ourselves in. And that's the beauty of it.
And we've got to experience this firsthand with doing that for and with each other. And, that's a huge part of that. These aren't just concepts. These are practical tools to use in pivotal moments that could otherwise completely disturb, distort, or destroy relationships, whether it's with a lover or a boss or a family member. When we get into those places of fears and then we get triggered and then we respond to the other person's trigger, and all of a sudden we're just causing hurt. then all of a sudden we can have detrimental effects that did not have to happen if we have the purpose set out from the beginning of what we really want to experience. And that's what the new moon does, which we just got out of, is, hey, in what ways do we really want to always keep in mind the three components of lunar cycle relating, which is innocence, transparency, and commitment.
Right. And this is a great segue, and I'm going to invite you to get the Course in Miracles book, and we'll get to our lesson in a second. But the segue really in this moment is that we might be talking about finding innocence in death and transition and that kind of thing, but each one of us has been in a dynamic, in a relationship with somebody that we really loved and seen it turn sideways or backwards in the sound of the way that you were just explaining, where all of a sudden something that could have been met in the moment becomes a much bigger deal than it has to be, and we find ourselves backpedaling and, stuck in a way that we've found an opposite to love, which there isn't an opposite to love, but we forgot the purpose to being in the connection was to love and was to heal and whatnot. And this really introduces a moment for us to say that we're excited and looking for people to work with and relate with. Invite to the River House. We've got a new course coming out on lunar cycle relating where we have some really beautiful, beautiful ways for people to very simply improve the nature of their relationships.
Yeah, we want it to become more tangible for people. I mean, believe me, I think this is episode 25. Did we confirm that? This is episode 25, which means we probably have pretty close to 25 hours of stuff where we reference different things about lunar cycle relating, different things about every cycle of the moon. So you could certainly watch the 25 hours at some point and you could probably pull a lot from it, but we're actually wanting to consolidate what we've been learning and experiencing with each other in this connection, and really think about how it could relate to people, whether they're in marriages, whether they're considering that they just want to start dating but they want to be a hell of a lot more intentional than they were in the past. We want to
or maybe you're like us and you've just met in the last during COVID or maybe just before, and you recognize that this connection isn't like the last connection you had, and you're actually finding that you're being called to a greater sense of purpose and service to humanity. And we're seeing a lot of couples just sort of find each other in the most extraordinary of ways and then step into their gift and their purpose and their mission in life. So that's what we're excited to offer, and look for something very soon.
Yeah, and love is simple.
Love is simple.
And I think one of kind of going back a little bit to the conversation, when we get into those triggered states, one of the biggest challenges also is that we don't see our own innocence. Say, whew, I was really hurting. Wow, I was coming from a place of fear. Instead, because we're feeling guilty, that's when we project even more blame. Yeah. More blame, because it's like, ooh, I don't like the guilt I'm feeling, and I know I just said something I shouldn't have said to that person, but now my mind is going to how it was justified and what that person did and what that person said and all of the circumstances and situations and complexities that led up to that moment, rather than if we just took a step back and said, whew, I just got into so much fear. I just got into such a big trigger. Maybe it came all the way from my past, my childhood. Maybe you did something that reminded me of a parental figure that didn't show up the way I needed them to. Who knows? But to just say, wow, that's really not the moment I wanted. That's not what I wanted to share with you in that moment. But we have to know our own innocence first in order to even facilitate those conversations, in order to not stay in the cycle of who's wrong. Wait, we're on the same team, whether we're in a family, whether we're in a partnership, or whether we are in our friend group or at our workplace. What does it look like to really recognize we're on a team?
And that team is oneness. Ultimately, we all are one organism with this earth and with even the animal kingdom and all the other human beings and everything. We are one with everything. And so love has no opposites to it until we create one in an illusion, which might be hate or fear or judgment or the rest of it. And when we find that opposite to love, now what we've done is we've separated ourselves from all of the oneness, and we create a sense of suffering. And so what we're really saying today is innocence is the way back through to the other side to find love. And
it doesn't matter how far into guilt or blame
no,
you've
it doesn't.
gotten. It really doesn't.
And it's okay.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's like, I know for myself even, you can dig yourself into such a deep hole that it just feels like the only way to get out is to double down and try to build a tunnel somewhere else. And,
Yeah, right.
and we're saying,
Yep.
no, there's a way to get out from that sooner rather than later, because it really is a mindset. You know, the peace of God, the peace of love is not something that's withheld from us until we do something, achieve something, have a specific conversation, say I'm sorry. It's like we can actually tap into it in that moment, and if we would do that before, that conversation might actually go a little bit better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, grab your Course in Miracles.
All right.
We have people that are starting to arrive for a memorial service, and that's the topic today, transparency. Our friend Travis Denali Norris, 53 years old, The Alchemy of Innocence, a fabulous, amazing teacher.
Do you know where people could get the book?
You know, I don't believe it's sold out in the world. His website is alchemyofinnocence.com, and if you really wanted a copy, I know we could get you a copy. He's got boxes of them, and I know Angie does anyway. So
yeah, and we can in the comments we'll write we'll put a post to a link to his website.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That way, that if you guys want to check out the Alchemy of Innocence, gives you certainly a far more in-depth thing than we can do in an hour about really the power of innocence. So we did the not so random number generator, as Anna likes to call it. And so it's saying that actually forgiveness is the great release from time. So a lot of what we talk from time.
From time, okay.
Yeah, forgiveness is the great release from time. It is the key to learning that the past is over. So sometimes we can even get upset and angry at people that they moved on, that they left the body. I mean, even if it wasn't on purpose, we might in our mind be like, why did you leave? You know? Or we might be mad at God. Yeah, we could be mad at God for that as well. And it's saying madness speaks no more when we tap into forgiveness, which is the key that learning that the past is over. Madness is not speaking anymore. There is no other teacher and no other way, for what has been undone no longer is. What has happened in the past is not right here in the present. And it says, who could stand upon a distant shore and dream themselves being across the ocean? So this might be even as we're longing for aspects of our past, right? And it's saying that has long since, to a time and place that has long since gone by. This could also be regrets. I wish I would have said this. Why didn't the conversation go this way? Why didn't I tell them how much I love them? Right? Yet we can still imagine that hold on. How real a hindrance can this dream be to where you really are? When we are stuck in the past, replaying it out, wishing it would have been different, how big of a hindrance is that to us living our lives in joy and peace and in love right now? It's saying, yet we can actually still imagine that we're somewhere else or in another time. So is this a hindrance to the place where we stand? Is any echo from the past that we may hear a fact in what is here to hear where we are right now? And how much can our own illusions about a time and place affect a change in where we really are? And it keeps, it says, the unforgiven is a voice that calls out a past that's forever gone by. And everything that points to it as real is but a wish that what is gone could be made real again and seen as here now in place of what is really now and here. Is this a hindrance to the truth? The past is gone and cannot be returned to you. Is this one of the things that's keeping you from the truth, is realizing that the past is gone?
And this is acceptance.
And it's not going to be returned to you. And that's especially true about death, because it's something that really can never be returned in the form that we had. We could still, dream about an ex and be like, hey, there's a shot at some point in the future that person will come back to us. But even that, it's saying, is that a hindrance to the truth, though? Is that a hindrance to the love and light that's in your life right now? And it's saying, and do you want that fearful instant kept wherein heaven seemed to disappear and God was feared and made the symbol of what you hate? And I know that's can seem like aggressive language, but that's intentional to say that it's, if we're wishing we could distort the past or change it or make it somewhat different, then there is inherently going to be a fear of God, even if we don't believe in God, whether it's just the world is out to get me or things just never go right.
And those are powerful beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is it gets back to we can choose a happy outcome. We can choose to change our minds about a person and about a situation. We can choose not to carry the guilt. We can choose not to have the judgment. We can choose to find the innocence in ourselves and the other. Yeah, pretty simply. And otherwise we're creating an insanity by wishing it were different than it really is. I mean, let's think about the ridiculousness of that. I mean, we know that when we're not in a grieving situation or our life is just what it is, that, you know, most people would agree that life is what it is at that moment until all of a sudden something shows up that they don't like.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
we can all say that about each other.
And I'm laughing because, you know, I've had to learn that one more than a few times, like the rest of us humans, you know. Gosh, all of a sudden I don't like it, and so I've just thrown my spiritual beliefs out the window that everything is the way it's meant to be and all the rest of it.
Now I'm angry.
When we were talking about how in love we were and what kind of beautiful life we were going to have, and then when it went the opposite way, why did I stop loving you? You know, what was that?
I don't know. When did that happen?
No, no, this is not you. But right, all of a sudden, the person that we love so dearly became not lovable anymore in our own minds.
Yeah.
Not because they changed. No, we all of a sudden got lost in our own expectations, our own projections, our own illusions about what we thought we were experiencing or what we wanted to experience. So
yeah,
it's
if
like
you were different, I'd be happy. If this were different, I'd be happy. If you know, once I get this, I'll be happy. And it's saying again, it's like, why are you trying to imagine that you're at some distant place and time, even as we're future tripping and saying, okay, if that person proposes, if I get this promotion, if this happens, if that happens. And it's like we're just imagining ourselves somewhere else. That's what I also like about the lunar cycle relating, is it helps, and the process that we're talking about doesn't mean there's any less commitment, but the commitment is knowing that we change, that life changes, and we recognize that we are very much like the earth and the phases of the moon and the way the sun goes around and the way that things blossom in the spring and die in the winter, that we can't try to create enough constructs that can create a sense of safety from the natural cycles of what happens in a person and the natural cycles of what happens in life. Signing a piece of paper is not going to mean that it's going to last forever for up to like 50-something% of the U.S. population. You can sign a marriage certificate and that doesn't mean it's going to be forever. But I also think that there are some basic things that can really help sustain a long-lasting, healthy, and fulfilling relationship that are some of the basic tenets of trust, you know, of having trust, and then the innocence, transparency, and commitment.
And if you've got two people that are willing to play this game this way, then you can continue to rebirth the relationship. You can have the honeymoon period over and over and over and over and over. Because what happens is you literally transform inside the container of the commitment using transparency and innocence to refine that beautiful, playful love that is inherent to all of us. And even take it further, that if you do need to separate, you can still use it. You can still do it in love. You can still do it in love.
And I think it creates enough openness to the idea of change within the general conception of the dynamic, that each person is really given the room to grow, rather than this, you know, when we recognize and welcome and acknowledge the changes that each person is inevitably going to make, rather than, hey, we have this very narrow path that I've set out for myself in my life and I'm waiting for you to get in line. Instead, it kind of it gives a little bit more room to breathe of, oh, we're both looking to transform and change in this dynamic, and here are some of the things that will help us to be the best supports to one another and to show up in innocence.
If I can't accept myself, how am I ever going to really truly accept you? Or accept that you're accepting me, or wanting. Sometimes that's what happens. We can't accept ourselves, because this is really what, for me, this whole program has led me to a point of finding even a deeper level of acceptance of life as it is in this moment, and of my own innocence and all of our innocence. But if I'm not accepting myself, there's no way that being in some kind of relationship is ever going to bring that to myself. And I'll never be able to see and accept you if I can't see and accept myself.
And that's where the beauty of really committing to transparency is, within the safety of innocence. Because then we really get to, as we get to know ourselves better, as we get to actually recognize that we want to be in a partnership where we can communicate our thoughts or feelings or disturbances or challenges or, things that are coming up, then all of a sudden I have to accept myself enough and accept my innocence enough to be able to communicate this. So that's some work that I need to do, and that we've committed to doing for ourselves within this dynamic. But then we've created this shelter of safety where when that opportunity comes, I've not only came to a different level of accepting myself to even have that transparency that's based out of innocence rather than here's how I really feel. Let me tell you everything I've been pent up for 6 months. No, it's an ongoing commitment and process. And then all of a sudden there's the container of wow, and then I can be really accepted for who I am because I'm with someone else who's also learning how to be committed to my innocence. And we're still both learning. Neither of us have perfected this yet, but
we're teaching what we need to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd love to have you join us. All right, so here at the end of the show, we always pick a tarot card from the Zen Tarot deck, and I'm going to divide it into 3 piles, and we'll do it differently today.
Okay.
I'll choose the pile, and you choose the number, okay? So there's 1 pile, and there's 2 piles, and there's 3 piles, and I always go with the second pile. So there's the second pile, and how many?
12.
12 down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. How about that?
We got ordinariness. Yeah, when did you get that one?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Wow, we've been,
Ordinariness is before your enlightenment, chop wood and carry water, and after your enlightenment, chop wood and carry water.
Yeah. And it speaks a lot to what we were talking about being present.
Yeah.
And this one, it's talking about just really being awake and alive to the things that are going on, and in appreciation and gratitude of the things that are in your experience right now. And to recognize we inherently can't do that if we're playing the what ifs game, the living in the past, I
wish it were different.
Yeah, or beating ourselves up in the present for a mistake we even made yesterday. It doesn't have to be these macro things. It can be like, I cannot believe I forgot to do that yesterday. I feel like such an idiot, da-da-da. How can I appreciate myself in this moment? How can I foster a healthy relationship with myself to take care of myself, to recognize maybe the things I was neglecting to do to take care of myself the weeks leading up to that? Instead, I could be like, wow, I want to get into an awareness of that was a call for love. Was that why haven't you been going to bed at a reasonable hour? Is that one of the messages maybe that was trying to give me that I could use right now that would actually be beneficial to me? Just being present, being in the moment.
Being present in the moment, right. The ordinariness is actually something far beyond ordinary. Mm-hmm. Ordinariness is actually being so completely immersed in the moment-to-moment activity and presence of life that you're in awe of it, actually.
Yeah.
You're in awe of simply the ordinariness of it, And that's a beautiful way, I think, to come to a conclusion here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just remember, you are loved, you are loving, and you are lovable. If you're interested in finding out more about our lunar cycle relating, you can shoot us a message on here. You can go check out, I think our email is listed on there. We also have shorter videos kind of explaining different concepts, smaller segments from our shows. It's on YouTube. Do we have that linked on the page?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
We said our commitment is to get it all out there by the full moon.
Okay, so stay tuned. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, there is the free empowerment course on the riverhouseuniverse.com and the Zoom calls on Mondays and Thursdays at 7.
That's right. Well, it's exactly 111 right now.
All right.
Yeah, and the name of our course will be the Twin Flame 111, 111.
111. All right, bye, guys.